Sorry about that. We're having rain here, and then my phone went off, and I got distracted, and I knocked over my microphone. And anyway, we were talking about large organizations and basically how they're top down, and that makes a lot of sense. The thing about large organizations is, why do you have bureaucracy? Why do you have hierarchy? You have to do it because you have so many. What you're trying to control again is random behavior. And so if your organization is that large, you need to go out and fix it. And for that, you need structure. And that's why they're always adding more and more management. The problem is now your systems have become very cumbersome. Small companies have much fewer functions, and they can also be hierarchical, meaning they tend to revolve around the boss. Good startups, actually, it's more like a family where everybody has their own functions, but you still have dad or mom, or whether you have a matriarchy or whatever. But anyway, here's the excuse me, classic structure of how things are set up. And so decisions are made at the top and it works down. However, Drucker's concept of the knowledge workers, these people who actually have the information, the problem-solving ability, who drive your organization, and empowering them to make technical decisions, it doesn't work that well in those organizations. And actually, over the summer, I was at an education conference, and these gentlemen from an older company, one was from Velcro, one was from BF Goodrich, one was from Goodyear, and they were bashing universities, saying what a bad job we do of teaching and preparing you. And I said, let's flip this script. I said, what do you offer for somebody who's innovative, who's creative, and who can produce great things? Why on earth would I want to go work for you? All you have is rules. You're not innovative driven. I mean, this is part of the reason why people want to go work for places like Apple and Google. So when we look at the earlier org chart compared to this one is much flatter. And that's you start to take out decision making. One big thing about large organizations is the plight of middle management. What happens when you're off the bottom but not quite at the top? And one thing I've seen about a lot of middle managers is when you're at the bottom, you take care of your people because you're on the front lines with them, and then you move into middle management. You start thinking about, how do I use the people who report to me to propel myself to the top? And that's really sad. That's why people are so angry at middle managers, because they feel like they're just using you for their own welfare. In that sense, I wasn't a good corporate middle manager because I still believe you protect your people. That's one of the most important things about your job. It's very difficult to bring in teamwork and asking people to do more unless you have that level of credibility. So you can see where your knowledge workers actually exist in the structure. Project structures, again, are very flexible, like I talked about. Cisco, a lot of these are matrix organizations. The thing about matrix organizations is because nobody reports to anyone else. Now it's really about interaction, how much you can influence others to get your job done. For an example, project managers are given the responsibility of a project. They get the technical people from the engineering department. They get the regulatory people from the regulatory department. They get the manufacturing people from the manufacturing department, and they form ad hoc teams. These tend to be much more responsive because they just have lots of focus. And not only that, but there's little fat on those teams. You pick out the people that you really need. And the big thing about them is, are they, using their knowledge and communicating it to the rest of the organization. Typically, there's still one person in charge, and that's normally the project manager. The problem with the project manager is you could just say no to them because people have responsibilities to their home departments. Like if I'm an engineer and I'm working on a project with the project manager, what's my boss in engineering I have to report to, not him. And that's where you run into trouble with these kind of structures. And that's that managers aren't necessarily given the authority to do what they need to do. Most global companies use matrices. The other big advantage of matrices is it can be cheaper. Because, like, for example, you need finance. Well, everybody drawing from the same finance group instead of having to hire one for every group is a lot cheaper. You can just read this. This is the matrix organization for the Department of Transportation. And so you can see how they're set up. Another example is NASA. NASA has a matrix structure. And NASA had to go that way because originally, I'll put it this way, anything government is going to run slow. And that's that anything having to do with regulatory is going to be a slow-moving industry. And NASA, to a large degree, still is a slow-moving agency. And that's that anything coming out of the government is going to mirror something hierarchical. But NASA's tried to buck that and go more to a matrix situation for the simple reason they're cost constrained. Bear of Germany is aspirin. Then one of the old divisions, what did they do? They tried to decentralize and have a flatter organization. And so they went to matrix management. And they consider it to be a great success. So we already talked about ad hocs and how those come together and the great flexibility it gives you. The problem is that you start to develop, okay, what's the negative of it? You start to develop a lot of teams. And so people become scared that those teams don't have accountability. And so how do you look over them? Network organizations are basically, you have clusters, and how those clusters interact are important because some clusters aren't tied to other clusters. And so now you don't have, the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing. And so the thing about clusters and networks are they work well when all the nodes and all the pathways are interacting. But if you have some pathways that don't interact as well, that's when you get into trouble. And so some have talked about the modern organization, which is the inverted triangle. And that's that your organization is driven by the knowledge workers. Does that work? Yeah, actually Motorola used to be like that once. IBM used to be like that once. Their CEOs were more or less just managers, and what they relied on is from the people who really knew their jobs to get their ideas and everything else. The problem is that you have to be careful how you manage your culture in those situations. Because what happened to Motorola is all of a sudden the employees became bigger than the company. Same thing with IBM. Then you become inefficient, and then it just falls apart. So for this, just lump it into the first discussion and just comment on each other's about different organizations that you've seen. And so that wraps up Module 9, Organizational Impact.